So you're all leaving. Most of you are not of retirement age. So is this...
Most of us. Wait a
all of you. You all look much younger than retirement age. Why are you leaving? Have you and Congress just grown apart, or is this a serious breakup?
Well, in my situation, for example, I'm chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. So we have term limited ourselves in the House of Representatives on the Republican side. So at the end of this year, this is my last chance to have an impact. This is my 6th year of that term. So I can either go out and campaign, or I can spend 100% of my time trying to move the legislation that I've got over in the Senate right now and attempt to further my efforts. We've passed already the sanctions on North Korea and on Iran. I would like to see what we can do to expand our efforts on social media and broadcasting into Iran, into Russia, into North Korea. I can get that done if I'm focused on that legacy. So for me, that's my focus.
But 6 committee chairs leaving so far, that's a lot of experience out the door.
It is, and there's a debate. You know, I think we should look at maybe the length of our chairmanships, but at the same time, I think these term limits are probably good from the standpoint of bringing in new blood, new ideas, and so that's one of the things we weigh on the Republican side.
Now, for me, I have not gotten disenchanted either with Congress. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I really have, but by the time I retire at the end of this term, it'll be 29 years. That's a whole career, and I'm ready for a new chapter in my life. I know that there's a lot of talk about how divisive the atmosphere is and how partisan and nasty and a lot of gotcha moments, but I think that's just part of the give and take in a good democracy, in a good republic. I come from a land where we don't have that give and take. I was born in Cuba, so I think all this hearty debate and just the clashing of ideas is a good thing. So I'm not embittered. I'm not stepping down because of President Trump. I was never with him, but it doesn't matter to me. This is a great chamber. I've enjoyed every minute, ready for a new adventure.
Senator, when you left your House colleagues and went to the other side of the Capitol, I'm sure you intended to serve more than one term in the Senate.
I always thought probably 2 terms. I did 6 terms in the House, so 12 years. This will be 18 years total in the Congress. That's a long enough time. Having said that, I would have probably served another term, but I'm kind of out of step with my party, and it makes it very difficult to have the positions that I have and win re-election in a Republican primary, or to spend that amount of time, as Ed said, you'd be focused your entire, frankly, 2 years on winning re-election and neglecting a lot of what you'd really like to do here in your last couple of years, and so that weighed on me as well.
So have you changed, or has the party changed?
I don't think I've changed that much, but I do think the party has changed considerably. I really do. We've been the party of limited government and economic freedom and free trade, and it's tough to say that is really what defines us now.
Do you all agree with that?
Well, from my standpoint, I think that the party has always been a big tent party. And I think that as long as Republicans are focused on what we can do, both in terms of creating opportunity, more freedom, and in terms of lessening the burden on Americans, I think what we have moved forward in terms of the tax reform is going to be enormously beneficial in terms of reducing not just the burden on our competitive position around the world. I think you're going to see U.S. businesses, instead of locating overseas, they're going to be expanding their operations here, and you're already seeing it in terms of higher wages, in terms of bonuses, in terms of added productivity. So from my standpoint, as long as we focus on those issues, and as long as we can move an agenda that creates more economic opportunity overall, yes, I have a disagreement as well in terms of trade. I happen to feel it's very important that we engage on opening markets overseas. But I think there's room in the party for a lot of different viewpoints. I'm an optimist. Youth for Reagan is how I got my start. and I watched the results of the Reagan tax cuts in spurring economic growth, in creating opportunity. So I'm bullish in terms of that aspect of what we're doing.
Congressman Dent, do you think that the tent is as big as it used to be?
No, I don't, actually. I think what's happening in Congress is the political center is collapsing. But that's not true across the country. What I found is that we have become enormously polarized here in Congress, and that polarization has led to a paralysis. I mean, the very simple, basic tasks of governing, just keeping the government open. I mean, how many CRs did we do this year? And we have a budget agreement. This should have been done probably over the summertime. It should have been completed. And here we are in February. We come up with a budget agreement 6 months into the fiscal year. We're trying to enact a proposal on Dreamers, DACA, and border security. This is a 90% issue, and we're having an enormously difficult time just trying to do things that we, I think, all would agree on. So I guess that's part of my frustration. And like Ileana, I've served nearly 28 years in between the state and now the federal government. I've run 13 times for office. I'm 13-0, and I'm not going to spoil a perfect record. Now, that said, I had no serious threat from the left or a credible threat from the right. So I really wasn't worried about re-election. But I do think that this era that we're living in, we have to do better in our politics, because it just seems the center is collapsing in Congress, but not across the country.
But if folks like you leave, don't things just get worse?
I think that part of the answer here, though, is for us to look at what we can do to change the fact that no longer do we really have the types of friendships across the aisle that we once had. And I want to just give an example in terms of our Foreign Affairs Committee. What I've tried to do is change the rules so that Republicans and Democrats are traveling together. When you're traveling to Southern Africa with someone next to you of the other political party, I guarantee you after 16 hours you get to know that person. By forcing the members to work together, by changing the attitudes, you create the ability to move a lot of legislation, as we have done in our committee, and have it signed into law. And I think that focusing on this aspect, if the institution can do more of this kind of work. This is how we passed the legislation to ban the ivory trade with my bill, how we got the sanctions legislation through, how we did the African Growth and Opportunity Act, bringing rule of law and to many countries in Africa. This is the approach that works.
But it seems to me the problem is not so much with the other party, the problem is within the party. When Senator Flake steps out of the GOP lane, he doesn't get slammed by the Democrats, he gets slammed by conservatives.
Wait a minute. The problem is not in the other party. You don't think that the leftward drift in the Democratic Party is not also part of the problem here?
Well, I don't see as many moderate Democrats saying this place is not hospitable to me anymore.
We have more individualists in our party willing to, frankly, express diverse viewpoints. We don't have a unit rule where everybody has to vote the same way, right? So it is harder to corral votes on the Republican side. But I just would want to make the observation that if we are going to figure out ways to work together, all of us have to be introspective in both political parties in terms of the way things have moved on the left, because that has made it also very, very difficult. We're able, to move legislation in my committee because we can bring people together, get them. I follow Jefferson's original rules. So in terms of decorum, we create an atmosphere where it's conducive, where the time is split equally and people are not trying to insult each other.
But when you
That's
look at,
important. But
when you
yes.
look at the future of the Republican Party, I think that we would be foolish to not see that we're heading into trouble. Very few women are running for on the Republican Party ticket for office. Far greater numbers of women are identifying themselves as being in the Democratic Party. Minorities that have always been traditionally a group that we should really be going after. I don't see that we really have a recruiting program that's active to get minorities involved in our party. So the growth of our party, it seems to be very limited in a specific group, whereas the demographics of our great country is changing greatly. There are more minorities, there are more women, and what are we doing? When you look ahead, what's our future going to be? Are we going to end up a marginalized party? I think that we need to look toward the future, and we need to have the policies that attract millennials, women, and minorities. I don't see that.
Well, you know, people have been sounding that alarm bell within the party for a while, and you're doing pretty well right now. You've got the White House, the House, and the Senate. So what incentive is there to change?
There's a fundamental, I think there's a fundamental political realignment happening in our country. You look at where the Democrats are, they've gone kind of full Bernie. Bernie has more or less taken over their party, even though he didn't win the nomination. On our side, you know, Donald Trump took over the Republican Party. And I do think that this political ground is shifting. Under our feet, nobody knows quite how it will settle. And in our party, and I think, you know, Jeff has been very true to himself all throughout the years. I've known him. But a lot of members have adjusted their politics to suit the president. And, you know, again, the Democrats have gone hard left, and our party has really become the the party of Donald Trump. And I think that has created this uncertainty where our party had traditionally been for opening markets. You know, I think a progressive trade policy, trade liberalization. That's not where the president is. That's where the Democrats have been, where he's been. So we've had this very odd set of circumstances that's leading to this instability.
You've talked about the fact that there used to be a litmus test on issues, and now there's a loyalty test.
Well, yeah, I've always felt that you know, prior to Donald Trump, we used to have what I would call the purity police. They would have these litmus tests, and there was a battle between the purists and the pragmatists, and I was always kind of in the pragmatic wing. But now, since President Trump has come on the scene, you know, it's really about loyalty to the man more than it is about any set of given principles or ideals, and I think that's what's really changed.
I would agree with that, and I agree with Ileana in terms of where the Republican Party is going and the danger. If you look every 4 years, every presidential election cycle, we are, as a country, 2% less white. You know, voters of color, it's changing that way. And I don't think that we've made enough of an effort as Republicans to appeal across a broader electorate. And then with young people as well, given some of the positions and the behavior that the president has exhibited, I think it makes it very difficult for young people to identify with the Republican Party. I think they've been walking away from the party in general. I think they're at a dead sprint right now, and we've got to change that.
And you, as a Cuban American, you were the first Cuban American elected to the House.
And the first
correct?
Hispanic woman. I don't know how many firsts we're going to be able to brag about or point to in the Republican Party. We don't need to change our principles. We don't need to change what we stand for. But like Charlie said, not every vote is a loyalty vote, whether you're for or against the president. And that's how it's framed all the time. You've got to be a loyal soldier. I don't think people feel as comfortable, the moderate Republicans feel as comfortable with this kind of tone.
Well, on this issue, though, if you think about individually, Ileana, what we're doing, we have recruited female candidates, Asian candidates, Hispanic candidates. Between us, if we think about some of the candidates that we're supporting right now, either in our own seats for the Republican Party, they are minority candidates that we're supporting, or in Arizona, Martha McSally. I mean, I'm just thinking about the role and the responsibility each of us have individually in terms of bringing up and supporting, and I'm thinking about the Asian American candidates that I've helped get elected to statewide office and are now supporting for congressional office. So I think for those of us in the party, a lot of the responsibility lies with us. You know, we've served our time. For me, it's been 26 years in the House of Representatives. But when we talk about who we're reaching out to, I think each of us have that responsibility to broaden the party, and I think we're doing it. I'm talking about our friends. You've helped elect 3 now. You've got 3 members who are Hispanic that I know you played a large role in their elections. I think we'll continue in this vein.
But she is pro-immigration reform, pro-hiking the minimum wage, pro-same-sex marriage. Could you have gotten elected in a Republican primary for the first time now?
I think so. It depends a lot on the personality of the candidate and getting back to what the Republican Party used to be, where we were accepting of all types. And yes, we're doing a pretty good job in recruiting candidates at the local level, at the state level. But when you look at the makeup of the Democratic Party here in Congress, I don't see those Asian women and those minority women serving in the House GOP or in the Senate GOP. I mean, that's the reality. Maybe our farm team is slowly coming up, but we used to be more accepting of having moderate positions, and now it's getting harder. And I want young people, I want millennials and women and minorities to feel like the Republican Party is their home, like they have a future there. So we have to have that kind of an inviting environment. And I worry that we're moving away from it. Now, I think I would have gotten reelected in my district, and because I work it hard and I'm very driven. But how tough is it out there for other moderate Republicans in other seats? Well, sometimes the president makes it pretty tough because not everything should be about him. It should be about your principles and your district. My district accepts those kinds of positions. We're a pro-immigrant community. My goodness, it's majority minority. Not every district is like that, but we should have that big tent theory, a big tent approach. Once again, I just don't think that we have it anymore.
I would just add that, getting elected is an exercise in addition, not subtraction. It's an exercise in inclusion, not exclusion. And it starts at the top. I agree with that. Candidates matter, and we have a responsibility to do our bit. But at the top, when the president makes incendiary comments on Hispanics, Muslims, women, the Charlottesville situation, and others, I think it narrows our appeal. And I do believe that we have to be much broader in our thinking and show that that the welcome mat is actually out and that we want everybody in.
And Senator, one of the things I've found very interesting is, you haven't been shy about going to the Senate floor and speaking very openly about what you see as the president's incendiary language, his mistruths. And there is such a deafening silence from members of your own party on that, even members who were very adamant that he shouldn't become president a year ago.
Yeah, it's like Charlie said, it's become kind of a loyalty test to the man rather than to principles. You see polls out there where it used to be, they always ask the pollsters just to get a gauge of where people are on the issues. What's the most important issue to you right now? Is it the economy? Is it jobs? Is it immigration? And now, the number one issue, or very close to the top, is always what people want to know of their elected officials or people who are running for office are you with the president? And it's become kind of a loyalty test that way. And then the problem is, if you, as a candidate or as an elected official, align yourself to a person rather than principle, then you're wedded to that person wherever he or she goes, and that's dangerous. It really is, and I see that a big problem for the party going forward.
And you've got the Freedom Caucus, this group of conservatives, telling the Speaker of the House, your leadership position is at risk if you stray too far from where we want to be on immigration.
I've never supported these types of tactics in terms of this effort. Every 2 years, we have leadership elections. And if you want to put yourself forward as a candidate, that is the time to have the debate, to lay out your arguments. Trying to sack your own quarterback is not a strategy, frankly, that usually when you're working as a team is going to lead to success, right? Threats usually don't lead to success. What would lead to success? I don't think that's successful in terms of getting legislation into effect. What I see here is an opportunity going forward to do something to address the gaps in border security, which are very real, which can be addressed in tandem with what we do on DACA. And we can get that done if we're working together as a team. That's the important point.
How do you get there, though?
Well, I would just add this. Look, it serves no purpose to make threats against a speaker. Clearly, in my view, a group of members can use their leverage to block us from doing things. They can't actually get us to do something, positive, to get something across the finish line. And we have this, there's this old notion of the so-called Hastert rule, the majority is needed on immigration or any other issues. I always said we abide by that rule until we don't. I've been on the majority side of a number of issues where we passed bills with a minority of Republicans because we had to do it. And that will be the same way on immigration. I hope we don't fall victim to that trap that we have to have a majority of the majority, because I suspect the Senate may pass a bill on immigration that could come to the House. It'll be bipartisan, and then we'll have to make a choice. Do we deal with a bill that could easily pass the House but not take it up because a majority of our members on the Republican side may not be supportive?
How long are we going to lead the world in mass shootings?
This is a real problem. We just had this terrible tragedy in our South Florida community, and whether you look at it as Second Amendment all the way, no restrictions, or whether you look at it as a mental health issue, all of those things can be brought together so that we can come together as a community and heal these wounds and prevent future shootings from happening. More details will be coming soon about how he acquired weapons and what kind of security we have at the schools, but it's tearing the country apart, and I think it's a real opportunity for the Republican Party to step up and be leaders in this debate, and we need to have it because it's just another day of tragedy. Are we just going to continue this throughout the school year? It is impossible to deal with this kind of grief on a daily basis.
We've had too many tragedies. Too many parents have had to deal with the enormity of this situation. We need community debates and we need a national debate. And yes, Congress
Seems
has
like
a
we've
role
had
that
a
we
national
have to
debate, though, right?
that has to play a role in here. And I'm incredibly frustrated that we haven't moved legislation to prevent bump stocks from being used. And we're pushing to do that. And I've supported bills on trigger locks that we've done, not having guns within 1,000 feet of schools. This issue that Ileana just spoke to, in terms of mental illness, we need to fix the system so that those who are mentally ill are identified, and when you do that background check, there should be a way to flag that far more efficiently than is being done now. That's part of addressing this issue.
Why has your leadership not moved bump stock legislation? I thought everyone agreed on that.
I think that the thought here is that ATF is going to take those actions on their own. But from my standpoint, as a co-sponsor of legislation to move something off the House floor, I think we ought to mandate it, legislative, not wait for the ATF. I understand they indicate they're going to do it, but we need to do it. And we need to do it in tandem also with this wider discussion in terms of mental illness and the ability of those with mental problems, to access firearms.
Senator, when you talk about immigration, mass violence, opioids, has Congress lost its ability to solve big problems?
It'd be hard to argue that we haven't. In the Senate, we have a 60 vote requirement for most legislation. Last year we had the health care debate and the tax debate under rules of reconciliation, meaning that we just needed a majority of Republicans, or just all the Republicans. That's done now. Now we're back in the place where it requires 60 votes, and we've had a hard time coming together. There are things that we should, on the gun issue, obviously the bump stocks, no fly, no buy, those kind of things. There's broad consensus in the country, certainly, and there should be, and I hope that we can move legislation like that. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to.
So that's a pretty scary thought to Americans, that their Congress cannot tackle big problems. What's the number one thing that Congress could do to change that?
Well, I just want to say, I thought, if there's going to be anything done on a bipartisan basis in this Congress, it's going to originate in the Senate. The House has a much more limited capacity to engage in a bipartisan way on big issues. And so I've noticed this, that I've said, on any number of issues, whatever is going to get to the president's desk is what comes out of the United States Senate.
Well, and I
It's
think
that
on
simple.
immigration, we'll
And
see.
on immigration, on budget agreements, we've seen this time and time again, and because the Senate has a greater capacity for bipartisanship at this moment in time than does the House.
But on immigration, you look at the president's position, and what he says on Monday may be different than what he says on Wednesday, and may be different on Friday. So it's very hard, I think, for leaders on DACA, on Dreamers like Jeff Flake, to figure out a way forward and eliminate the president from the agenda. Then that becomes a problem in the House, because then we think you have a deal in the Senate, comes back to the House, and the president says, I don't support that bill, and all of that work will be for naught. So it's schizophrenic what's coming out of the White House in terms of policy on immigration and Dreamers.
And on that point, Congressman, you're the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. When other countries see that this White House can't even get its story straight on something as simple as a security clearance, the rest of the world thinks what?
Well, I think, under our system, as I explained, under the American system, we've got more than one voice. Congress has a voice, the judiciary has a voice, and explaining that is to allow them to understand something of our robust debate here. We are a system of checks and balances. It was designed this way, after all, in order to try to force consensus views as we move legislation forward. And I think that walking them through that process gives them an understanding of our system.
But security clearances for people who have not passed those check marks, it's just not the normal way that we should be handling classified information. So I think it's sort of shocking when you see the list of all of the folks who've had access to sensitive documents who have not been cleared in order to view them. I find it shocking.
Should John Kelly step down?
No, I don't think John Kelly should step down. I think we're in a process now where the Committee of Jurisdiction here is doing an investigation of just this issue. And I think you wait until you get the facts, and then you can move forward from that.
Do you agree?
Well, I think he ought to step before a microphone and explain how this latest situation came to be. I think we do need a better explanation, but I think he can if he'll do it.
It's bigger than one man. Yeah. Anyway, we get another chief of staff, the problem continues.
The White House, I think, completely mishandled this whole Porter situation. That said, prior to John Kelly coming into the chief of staff's job, the White House had been in pretty much chaos and anarchy, and it was very dysfunctional. And so he did bring a great degree of stability and order and discipline to the management of the White House until this recent episode. So at this moment, I'd like to find out who would be the replacement before I'd call for him to step down.
I know that your time is short, so I would just want to end by asking you, as you prepare to leave Congress, what is the one thing that you wish you had gotten done while you were here, but you couldn't?
Well, for me, Holocaust survivor legislation, I'm very close to the Holocaust survivor community in South Florida, and they have been wronged by insurance companies 70 years after the Holocaust. They still haven't, those insurance companies like Allianz and Generali, they still haven't made good on these survivors. And I've filed a bill to get them their day in court. That's all it does, to give them the ability to sue these companies. And maybe they'll win and maybe they won't, but these are legitimate policies that they were never paid out for their pain and suffering. But it's hard to fight the insurance companies up here. I wish I would be able to pass that bill before I leave.
For me, in 1985, I had an opportunity to spend some time in East Germany on a program there. And I saw the impact at that time under Reagan of what he was doing with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. And in talking to young East Germans in Dresden and in East Berlin, you could see the impact as they were listening to these lessons on political pluralism, on tolerance, on market economy, and their views were changing away from the totalitarian system to an embrace of a more democratic system, the desire to change their system. I've passed legislation into law that is that has overhauled this effort so that we can now use social media as well as radio and television. But what I want to see is the implementation successfully of this effort so that we combat Russia's weaponization of information that Putin is using right now, so that we do something in North Korea to get this kind of information that I saw the impact in East Germany into North Korea through radio and thumb drives. I want to see this in Iran. 2/3 of the people say, you know, we want a Western-style democracy without a theocracy. We need to get that up to 85% to see change in Iran. One of the reasons I'm focusing 100% of my time right now on Chairman of the Foreign Affairs is on issues like this to see that this gets done.
One thing I'd like to see happen before I leave would be reform of the sugar program, so we can have market-based prices for sugar. I'd like to see the full reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank so it can function. But on a bigger scale, I think my biggest regret right now is that that our country and maybe some in Congress don't fully appreciate the role that this country has played since the Second World War in providing for a better world. This rules-based order that we work so hard to establish and defend is under threat from within, and certainly from the Russians and others who dislike it. But I think that's one of the great frustrations I felt, that this order that we work so hard to build and sustain is under threat from within.
Echo what Charlie said in terms of rules-based international order and trade and whatnot, but I would say our domestic fiscal situation. My regret is that we're never able to come to a broad agreement to actually put us on a sustainable fiscal path. We're not on one now. $20 trillion in debt, adding what, $600–700 billion this year, and deficits as far as the eye can see. We need desperately a serious, not just discussion, but actual legislation to rein in mandatory spending and to have, I think we have a better tax and regulatory environment so we can grow economically, but we've got to get our fiscal situation in order.
And establish a Latino museum. I forgot about that one. I've been working on that for 10 years. It's going to happen. I'd like to be a part of it.
Here in Washington?
Here in Washington, yes. It's going to happen.
Well, thank
We're
you.
almost there.
Thank you to all of you for your service and for sitting down with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you.